What is up, everybody? Good morning to the West Coast out there, and good evening to the East Coast.
Yeah, I'm still getting my coffee in and kind of having a morning here. I've been only up for like an hour and change, but
I woke up at seven
glad to
thirty.
see you guys are around on your bright and sunny Sunday afternoon. Hopefully, some people bother to sit inside and wait for us for this.
Yeah. Welcome back to the second episode of the Clinic with Dr. Chad. We're going to talk a lot about what our biggest struggle was last year, and I believe that was our offensive line getting injured, all with knee injuries or somewhere in the leg. We had people that stepped up and made an offensive line still somewhat able to be as good as we thought our offensive line should be. So with that being said, I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Chad. I'm probably going to point the wrong way. There we go. I pointed the right way this time.
It's tricky. We switch boxes sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So today's topic is, of course, the tackles. We lump them all together, even though none of them have the exact same injury. They all have at least one overlapping knee ligament, and that was the medial collateral ligament, the MCL. And so we kind of lumped them all together. The time they got injured, very coincidentally, leaves them all on a timetable where they're probably going to be ready to both practice and, get into some game time activity, all maybe within a month of one another. Although, hopefully all by training camp. We don't know for sure, but they should all be together like around a month apart, because of the way their injuries, surgeries, and severity all lined up. So it's kind of interesting. So we're going to mush them all together, and we're going to do just whole show on tackles, and kind of see what you guys think.
Good deal. Let's start off with the worst one, I guess. We'll go with Jedrick Wills. He was the first one to go down.
No, Conklin, right? Jack Conklin, you mean?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I was
First
thinking
one.
of the guy I don't like the most. But anyways,
Oh,
go
yeah.
ahead.
By the way, for anybody that hasn't watched the draft show, we created a draft scale based on everyone Andrew Berry has drafted. It actually could be for any draft. It's based on the players drafted and kind of whether they're a backup, a starter, or like an elite player, and where they are in their level of like contribution to the team after 3+ years. And go back and take a look at it. It's really funny. Jedrick Wills, who we'll be talking about, of course, is on it, and his score has probably given us the most, both like feedback questions, frustration, or like way to kind of delve into this scale more than like anybody else that we covered in the first 4 drafts that Andrew Berry made. But yeah, so Wills had a little more similar injury to Jones. The first injury that happened in game 1, unfortunately, was Jack Conklin. For those don't remember, it was a contact injury with a player that was coming down the line. I believe it was a edge rusher from the other side that Jedrick Wills was like pushing in. He was trying to get inward leverage, and then I think trying to get around Jed, who was trying to kind of keep leverage on him. He lost his footing and went down and rolled right into Jack Conklin's left knee. And that is, we kind of showed some of this a little bit last week, but we're gonna break out some pictures. I'm gonna break out the model a little bit. But what essentially happened was this knee is a right knee, so it's not a perfect.
That's actually the star of the show as well.
Yeah, the knee. Knee bone's connected to the hip bone. So what essentially happened was here's the knee front on. This is your fibula. So this is the outside. Whatever you see, this little tiny bone, this is the outside of the knee. So what happened was somebody went flying into Jack Conklin this way, and they kind of bend outward this way, and boom, this pops. And oftentimes the ACL, which is hidden back in there, also pops. So his injury was an MCL and ACL tear from what I can gather, and we'll never know the full details unless a player or team personnel gets
Comes out and
gets
tells
permission
us.
gets permission to evolve it. The doctors can if they have permission, but in this world, like, you don't want to risk getting in trouble. So typically the player is the one that has to tell you. And the reason there's sometimes misinformation is because a lot of these players are not super familiar with the terminology, so even they kind of mess up what the procedure was. But what we do know, what was confirmed for sure, was that he tore his ACL and he tore his MCL, both severe enough that they needed reconstruction, and that would be pretty common. If you tear your MCL and you get that bend enough that you tear your ACL as well in the middle of the knee, that's a pretty severe force, which means both probably need reconstructed. So if you want to know a lot about ACL and knee reconstruction, last episode of the clinic we did Nick Chubb, and that was a very in-depth look at repairs of all the ligaments on the outsides of the knee and the ACL. I would encourage you to go back, pop through YouTube and find that episode. It's a little bit longer because we went real deep on his whole procedure, all the different ligaments involved, his different parts of his rehab, where he's at now, and what we could expect. So that was a big one. We'll go a little less deep into this one here with Conklin's, but this is kind of our starting point. Those are the two things we know that were torn. Often with this, there's some cartilage damage or a meniscus tear, but it's possible it was a clean tear, and those two things didn't happen. For anyone asking, this was not the same knee as Conklin, or that's the same leg, I'm sorry, as Conklin injured when he tore his Achilles two seasons ago. And honestly, actually, for most players, although it depends on how the surgery goes, age, all these other factors, for most players, that is a much worse injury. An Achilles tear is more severe, longer rehab, much harder time coming back, as we talked about when Grant Delpit hurt it. Takes a full, it is one of those stereotypical things where they say it takes you like a full season of playing to recover from that injury. So that was the worst injury, and he did come back from that, so that's a positive sign. All right, so again, for Jack Conklin, left ACL, left MCL tear, and we'll get into the procedures later, but I'm going to kind of go through each injury, and then we'll talk about the procedures and just identify which players had each one.
I might be able to actually help a little this week because of last week's show.
Right. So next up, it's a good idea. We should go in order. The next up would actually be Jedrick Wills. I believe his injury was November 5th, playing against the Cardinals. It was a unique one, though, in that his return was expected to be non-surgical. So they tried to rehab that knee, and they didn't put him directly on IR. There was about, I want to say, 6 games left in the season. If this injury is non-surgical and there's enough connection on the MCL, we'll see non-surgical ones before. I believe not that long ago, maybe Joel Bitonio or one of our guards had an MCL injury that they didn't have surgery, and then several weeks later they were able to return. I'd have to have my memory jogged on that one, but the idea was they tried that for Jed, and I believe he rehabbed for about 5 weeks. There was only 1 game left in the season and in the playoffs when they decided the rehab's not working. He's not recovering well enough. It probably is surgical. So they, at that point in the season, in mid-December, with just a few games left, they cut him off, and they decided, okay, we're going to call him out for the season. And shortly after that, he was able to get his surgery. So that puts him on a weird timetable because the injury was actually a month before Dawand Jones, but he didn't get ruled out for the season until mid-December.
Right.
His injury was his right knee. This is Jedrick Wills' right knee, and it was his MCL as well. We just talked about with Conklin. So again, this is usually a Somebody hits you on the outside of the leg where the fibula is, bends the knee that way. This one's stretchy. This one has nowhere to go. And eventually these fibers here, somewhere either mid joint stretch, or more likely up to where the joint attaches to the bone, where the ligament attaches to the bone. That's where it might pull and either tear off the bone a bit or tear along that insertion. This one's interesting because I've got these screws in here, which is kind of, when we get to the procedure, what it might look like after they repaired it. This would normally just be like connected directly into the bone.
So that's technically just a muscle, correct?
No. Your ligaments are like basically, so your tendons attach to a muscle and they attach your muscle to a bone. Ligaments, on the other hand, attach a bone to a bone. So the top attachment for this MCL is going to be on your tibia, the lower bone, and then the bottom attachment, and then the top attachment is going to be on your femur, the upper bone, your thigh bone. So this is like your shin bone, this is your thigh bone, and the ligament attaches to both, and it allows the knee to move in certain directions. This would be a tendon. This is attached to your quad. This would be attached to your thigh. So it allows, see, you can bend here, and because that strap is attached how it's attached, it allows that motion. What it doesn't allow is your knee to go side to side. So the knee can't go this way, side to side, because these don't allow it much movement. There's a little give, this is real life. You could move, I could have a patient on the table and pulling and doing that to kind of stretch and move their tissue around. But if you landed on the ground and your knee is kind of stiff, they don't want this thing to be able to move very much. Nature has found a nice way to kind of lock all this stuff up. Your ACL and your PCL, which we'll get into, their job is to make sure the knee can't shift forward or back like that. It can only go a little. It has a little give, but can't just go where it wants. If it was up to the muscles, it'd be like your shoulder. It'd be able to do all that, but we'd be wobbly. We'd be all over the place.
Yeah.
So the ligament is like a strap that allows the knee to move in certain directions, but each ligament protects it from moving a different direction. That's why the injuries happen usually from a force the other direction. So the ACL is typically a hyperextension where the knee straightens all the way and maybe over straightens, or it can be from an MCL tear where the knee bends, the MCL tears, the knee keeps going, and the ACL also tears.
And obviously those ligaments aren't screwed in like they are on that model, but they just go right off of the bone.
Yeah, the funny thing is some of them on our players will be. They're actually going to have to take probably screws, push the ligament back on the bone, put, kind of suture the ligament pieces together and put a screw as a like anchor into the bone to hold that in place so it can continue to seal back. That way the screw will be holding it on, but so will the ligament when it seals back together. I almost forgot. Wait.
Oh, man.
Oh, doctor mode. Okay, sorry. Much smarter. Let's keep moving on. Oh, yeah, you've got to do yours as well.
There we go.
Anything I've said to this point, I don't know if I would trust me without the glasses on.
Now the glasses are on. It got
okay,
real.
So for Jedrick Wills, so again, Conklin, ACL, MCL on his left knee, Wills, MCL on his right knee, and then his PCL, this one on the back here that keeps your tibia from sliding backwards, and some bone bruising, which is just painful. It's not a matter of, slowing down the rehab that much, other than it's difficult to go through the rehab procedure when you have bone bruises. That's essentially means like after he tore this, when the bones came back down into place, they probably hit each other pretty hard. And it literally is like a type of an injury where the two bones hit or something hits the bone and kind of bashes into the bone, making the actual bone bruise more than it's just like it sounds, a bone contusion versus like a bruise you would get when you hit your muscle, your thigh, your elbow, your bicep, and you get that like normal rounded blue bruise. This is like a deeper contact on the bone.
So with a bone bruise, does that relate to come back to recovery time and before surgery? Do they have to wait for swelling to go down?
Nothing
to do
for
surgery,
this.
or?
Yeah, if there's more inflammation, they might have to wait for swelling to go down. So that could be a part of it. They might have to wait a week or two, and maybe it could be more likely a couple days because it's so inflamed and they need to get the inflammation down. You don't want to do a surgery through a ton of inflammation, which is why, like Nick Chubb had his first surgery, they waited several weeks before they got in to do his second reparative surgery. They had to let the first portion begin healing, and then the inflammation from that surgery go down. Okay, then our last guy who is hurt, third, shockingly, like it still blows my mind to think of the poor Browns offensive line room as each one of these guys is just going down. You know, Jed's trying to fight back. They're like, maybe he can make it. Like around like a week before they call it quits on him, on December 7th at practice, Jones tears his right MCL also and his meniscus. I don't know if it was medial or lateral. I just know that he had some meniscus tear. And so that is he gets his MRI and he's ruled out right away. And so now we're looking at Jed coming back as our only hope. And a week later, they decide he's not responding well enough to rehab. He's going to need surgery to, reconnect this ligament. So by that point in mid-December, we're now down all three of our tackles going into the end of the season and the playoffs with number 4 and number 5. So pretty crazy.
Bummer year, man, for the offensive line. Just like you said.
Yeah, they really. I mean, they pulled through. We watched James Hudson last year. He was a bad backup. I have a hard time believing unless he really improved. He's still a young guy. He wasn't drafted that long ago. I have a hard time believing unless he really improved that he's going to make this team again, because maybe he could back up the right side, but now we already know we have 2 really talented guys on the right side. So you'd be keeping somebody on the who can back up the left, and maybe our backup, maybe if it's Dawand Jones or Conklin, whoever it is, could do both. But it does give me the feeling he needs to make a giant stride to make this team again. And if I'm being honest, I don't even remember who played right tackle to close out the year last year. It was just such a blur of linemen that I can't remember which player actually ended up coming in. But
let's look that up. Actually, I'll figure that out. Go ahead and keep talking. I'm gonna figure that out because I don't know who it was either.
Okay, we're gonna pop up the pictures in a few minutes, but the only thing I wanted to get into was kind of the timelines real quick, and then we'll go into. Well, actually, let's do it the other way. Let's look into. You find that out. The next things we'll do is we'll look through a couple pictures so anybody can kind of see what goes into these injuries and this reconstruction. Whenever you put ligaments together, they typically call it a reconstruction. Some things they call a repair, but for this pod, we'll call it an MCL reconstruction, ACL reconstruction, and then meniscus repair. So we'll go through the pictures of what each thing is. We'll highlight which player had it. I'm trying to keep it all straight. I've got a little board here, but
James Hudson the third. Sorry.
So James Hudson, I thought was playing the left. I didn't know who's playing the other side.
It might have been the only other option would have been that Roy Mbetika.
I don't know.
Yeah, Michael Dunn or Jermaine Ifedi.
No. Michael Dunn was playing for a little while. We lost a guard, maybe Batonio for a couple weeks, but I don't know. I know, we had Whippler playing too for a little while, right guard, and he didn't go out of tackle anymore. But it's in the past. I don't know if he's even with the team at this point anymore. But moving on, let's pop into some of these pictures. You want to bring a couple of those up?
Yeah, do you want the MCL tier?
Let's go in the order that we originally kind of sent them out. So I think the first one was the ACL reconstruction with patellar tendon graft.
There it is.
This is the most severe of the injuries. So when it comes to the timeline, that's the timeline that we're going to be looking at with Jack Conklin. Did that pop up? I can't see it, but that's fine.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I can't see it on my end for some reason. I thought I could last week, but it's fine. I'll kind of just beam through it. So the ACL reconstruction with patellar tendon is something we talked about again a little more deeply than we will today with Nick Chubb on the last episode. So be sure to give that a look. So what they essentially do for this, and part of the reason that the rehab is a bit slower, is the best way to kind of the gold standard for recreating an ACL is to cut a middle piece of the patellar tendon. So you can see in this picture that little bone graft that they have out, that's actually your patellar tendon graft. And what they do is they cut a perfect kind of rectangular cut out of the center of the quadriceps ligament or quadriceps tendon, this bottom half here. On the picture, it makes it look like it stops here and starts again there. In real life, it kind of more stops but continues connecting and then connects again. So it's a little more stable. But this bottom portion, they'll literally cut down, cut over, come up, and cut over. And the reason that makes a great connecting piece for an ACL is A, it's a very sturdy ligament and a very sturdy structure. And B, because of the patella and the front of the shin bone, there's an actual bone on the end of each piece of the what will become the new ligament. Why that's so important is they can drill a diagonal hole straight through the knee, which we'll show you on the next picture, and essentially string this through. The bone can be screwed into place, and then the only thing going through the joint part of the knee is the new ligament, and the bone will eventually start healing together with the other bones naturally, since they're, it's your own graft, so it's very compatible. The bones will all start healing together, and blood vessels and things can start reforming to help this thing regain its full strength and its full connection in your own body. The screws don't get removed. They're there just to place a connection so that everything comes together. What seems very obvious, though, to anybody looking at this picture is, much like Nick Chubb's episode, the reality is your strengthening and your knee movement are very limited early in the surgery, which is why you have a limitation to how much you can lift and do even within the protocol as you recover for this, because again, now your patellar tendon also has to recover. 2/3 of it is still there connected, and it will eventually strengthen and scar itself over. And over weeks and months of activity and training, it will reform its old strength. I think most of the reading I did, most of the research I found suggested that takes about 6 months before the patella kind of scars over and starts strengthening into its old self, which means, of course, you're at risk of a patellar tear or just patellofemoral pain and inflammation, joint pain, and arthritic pain. So the limiting factor to that, of course, is just, you can't really raise your strengthening level to a certain level until after about 6 months, and that's when you can really begin lifting the heavy weights gradually again based on what strength you're at. So it's just a factor too. It doesn't matter how long the ACL might take to adhere and become strong in there. You also have to get your strength up to a good game level. So that is the ACL one. Let's go on to the picture of the bent knee with the drilling. I just like for people to see this, honestly.
Is that the graft placement?
Yeah. Yes, the ACL drill
there
placement.
It is.
I like people to see this one, to be honest, because so if you look at the first picture on the left, you can see that kind of torn fiber ACL. What that's showing is an ACL that's actually still like attached by a thread, like hanging by a thread. That's the kind of thing that could have happened in Nick Chubb's surgery, where they weren't sure if they had to replace the ACL, because in the imaging, like the MRI, you can kind of see it's connected. Maybe you just can't see it clear enough. So you're like, we have to get in there. It looks like it could be torn, but it's not completely torn. That's kind of how that confusion can happen, because maybe it's shadowy with the PCL going the other way behind it. And maybe it is connected. I think from what I remember reading from Adam Schefter and Mary Kay right after this injury, I think it was a pretty clean tear for Jack Conklin. And I think they announced Monday, like, we did the MRI, it's an MCL and ACL tear, he will be out for the season. So this one's a good example, though, because it does show you how sometimes it's not completely torn. And when it's not, they would just cut it out smooth that out and just completely get rid of the old ACL in this case. And then, so this picture, just so people understand what's really happening in a surgery like this, because I know a lot of fans are like, we all tend to be a little disconnected with players. We just want them out on the field, pushing, playing through injuries. But sometimes you see what actually happens to them, and it gives you a feeling of like, oh, yeah, that probably is pretty rough to come back from. In this particular procedure, they cut out that patella, they make that graft. They get it just the length that they want it measured diagonally on the knee, because it is a diagonal. ACL is a cruciate, like a crossing ligament. So it is a diagonal. They drill up through the front inside of the knee towards the back outside of the knee, and then literally string and slip that new ACL graft up through those two holes going through the center of the knee, so that the only thing in the middle of the knee, as you can see in the second picture to the right, is new ACL, and all the bone pieces are connected to the bone. Right. So that's all I kind of wanted to see you for that, because I think people are astounded, like, oh, they actually are like using power drill type tools, drilling holes through the knee. Like, that's not comfortable stuff. And
I don't like looking at the picture. Sorry.
Yeah, it's very swollen. It's very inflamed afterwards. It takes your body a little time. But then, a few weeks later, it starts feeling mobile again. You can stretch the knee out, and you can start gaining range of motion. You can start walking without your brace after, 4 to 6 weeks. And in some people earlier, depending on what other damage there is. So yeah, that's an important one for people to see. So those are related specifically to Jack Conklin in this particular case, because Jack Conklin is the only one who tore his ACL in this group. So that procedure is Jack Conklin's, one of his, and honestly, that is the most important one, because it's a slower recovery for obvious reasons when you see the other two procedures. It's a slower recovery. It is a long time without being able to fully work out. So even when it does heal, the player has to get themselves in shape, and the best thing you can do is just keep up with the protocol. Every phase you can do a little bit more. You just keep trying to maximize that particular chunk, but you can't really jump ahead. It's too risky for tearing the graft, and you just drilled a hole diagonally through the leg. It's not like if you re-tear that, it's easy to just pop in another one, because you've already used. Is there another
medical term for that instead of just saying drilled a hole right through your bone?
No. That's what I would call it. Yeah, so it's like, just think of it like what it's like if it's like when you were a kid and you have a 3-ring binder or something, you accidentally tear the holes out, and you did what every kid did, and you're like, okay, I'll punch a little hole because I need this piece of paper with my note on it. I'll punch a little hole like a 1/2 inch offline from that, and then I'll just stick it back in. Well, you don't want to tear that one again. You've run out of extra space now to do another hole. So it's very important that you take these kind of tears conservatively, and you let the player heal if you have the chance. So that's why it's like, he probably won't be rushed to come back. We've seen him come back from other injuries. I don't know what the timetable will be. He's going to be real close to being ready for the beginning of the season. If they think he needs another 3 or 4 weeks or something, they're not going to try to push him to get out there sooner, because the risk is too great, right? So just keep that in mind. They're going to really say, like, let's make sure you're fully back from this before we get you out there. We covered it on the Nick Chubb episode, but just as a reminder, that patellar tendon, again, takes about 6 weeks to kind of heal and scar enough that you can start really gradually increasing the strength of your quad to the type of lifting you need to do to get your full strength back. Along that route, somewhere between like 5 or 6 weeks, you can usually start doing a little bit of like hop. You can do some just general forward running on a flat surface. That's some of the videos people saw of Nick Chubb. He was doing training drills where he's running and purposely trying to swing one leg faster than the other. You can start to get a little bit into that, but you want to be careful, because you don't want any like poor landings where you might like tweak the knee by landing too stiffly.
There's no way I can do that, run like that, even without having to. There's no way.
It's hard. Now, for somebody like Nick Chubb, he's probably been doing those drills since like junior high track. He was a track star, we all kind of know his background with running too. So he's probably been doing those kind of drills for a long time. He probably does feel pretty familiar, and he's just trying to like do it differently now. But look at the size of somebody like a Jack Conklin. Like, he's not going to be doing the same level of side-to-side hops, forward running. Like, he's not going to be doing the type of exercise at the pace and the protocol of Nick Chubb. It's just a different type of athlete. You're not like, oh, let's do these speed drills. These aren't something that a guy like Jack Conklin has been doing prior to the injury, right? So that's a big difference there. But again, you get into those protocols like we looked at with Nick, and it will still follow basically the same protocol. He's going to get to being able to step up on a box and like hop off and control his landing, which even somebody that size should be able to do. He's going to get to straight running. Then he's going to get to like where Nick Chubb is. He could be there already. We just haven't seen any of that kind of video. They were injured around the same time, which gives them a similar length of recovery, even though Nick's was more severe. As we talked about, the most severe thing is the ACL. So that's really the timetable you're on. Conklin got injured a week earlier, but also Nick didn't have the ACL surgery until like 6 weeks later because they did his surgery in 2 parts. So Nick, I would have expected would have a little longer recovery. He also ended up having his surgery later. So we'll see, but he is a different kind of athlete as far as like how his body was in shape beforehand. Jack is an incredible technician, incredible high-level athlete. I just think somebody like Nick is sort of this all-around level of strength and speed that will have an easier time getting himself in physical shape for football when his protocol goes on. So following, down the line, this could take, anywhere from like 9 months before the ligament is healed enough, the ACL, where it's safe to do high-level stuff like lateral jumps and cuts for some people. Even at 9 months, the ACL is probably, per most research, around only like 80%. And then around like a year to 15 months, it's like between 92 and 100%. And I say that because I don't think it always ever gets to 100%. But in that like 90s range and up is when they pretty much treat it like, okay, it's probably close to where it's going to be for the next year. So now is when we can really let loose. And if they can't play now, like, there's no real significant difference to what they'll be in a month or two. It's more about, are they physically in shape to play and ready? Are they confident enough to play in that knee? That's another piece of it. And so that's going to be the timetable for Jack. I don't know where he's at because we haven't seen any rehab videos, but we're gonna at some point here, he's doing like ladder drills, which is perfectly legitimate for a lineman, little hops, footwork, and then he'll get into cuts, which again, our linemen do have to do because sometimes they pull. So he's going to have to do some predicted lateral cuts where they tell him, okay, I want you to come forward a little and shoot right, or just take off to the left or right, sort of like a 3-cone drill type of a thing. And then unpredictable cuts where they, point directions and he has to think on his feet and quickly engage his muscles and move direction. And then the last thing, like anything, is contact drills. They'll start having him hit the bag. They'll start having bags hit him. He'll try to do some like motion while people are like knocking him to the left and the right to make sure he has the muscle coordination and stability to return to sport. It's such quick chopping footwork for a tackle, along with just perfectly coordinated hand punches and grabbing and repositioning the pass rusher. So again, we're looking at that kind of timetable of somewhere between 9 to 15 months. For him, I'd be leaning somewhere between, about 10 to 11 to 15 months, hopefully on the early end of that. It sounds like he released something in late June saying like, I'm cleared for sports activity. It's kind of when he's like posted like, okay, I've made my comeback. That gives you the feeling that he probably was cleared for actual like football practice type activities, though we haven't seen it yet. This is the type of case where it's like, well, if all you've got is mini camp, why wouldn't you give that extra month of healing to let that ligament get closer to its 100%? That's probably what they're thinking on him.
So we've seen this obviously end careers, injuries like this end careers, with Jack Conklin being older, somewhat injury prone.
And older though, still only 29. So
right.
For those of you out there listening who have made it to 30 and beyond, you know that your body takes a little bit of a change at that point athletically. You need longer recovery times. You get more sore. You just don't have the burst like that explosion you used to have in a lot of cases. You can stay very strong. You can maintain muscle strength very well throughout your whole 30s and on, but like explosion, speed, recovery, all that stuff dwindles. But yeah, you're right. He's at the older age of a football career. Your linemen probably play really good ones into their like mid 30s. Some are done in their early 30s, but I think you expect a lineman to go to like 33, 35. Conklin, if I were him, I would probably finish out this contract and think real long and hard about the 3 major surgeries I had to have and how much I want to be able to walk as a big fella, keep myself in shape, run, exercise as I get older. So we'll see. But yeah, so with his surgery being in September, the thought would be in September, give or take a month, he may be ready to go. So keep your eyes peeled for that.
It's going to be a fun year coming up to
yeah,
not
there's
knowing
a lot
what's
of unknown.
happen.
You know, the guy could be ready to start training camp. You know, it'd be the 11-month mark, and maybe he avoids a little contact, but he does most of the drilling in training camp. You know, or maybe they hold him out as a veteran, a guy who every time he's played has been really good, and his biggest problem is injuries. And they say, you know what, we trust that when it's time to play, you'll be able to play. Let's not practice you all that hard through training camp and just get you out there week 1. You know, so we'll see. But don't be shocked if he's ready at the beginning of training camp to just go. Don't be shocked if it's September and they're like, yeah, he's still on the PUP list. He might not be back until October or whatever. So, and we've got the right players in our locker room to handle that situation. I think everybody would be very comfortable with the other 2 guys getting out there. And I would expect with their injuries, even though they were much later, that they'll have less restriction. So
agreed. We got.
All right, so let's
watched it. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so let's move on picture-wise, right, to our next one.
We on MCO tier.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the next one. So this is the main one because this is what basically everybody did, and I think I might have sent one or two pictures of this.
Yeah, this is the MCL tier.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So the MCL tear. Basically, I just wanted up on the screen to show people like what we had talked about earlier with that outside force coming in from the lateral side of the knee, pushing. I know that's exactly how Jack Conklin's injury happened. Was a player rolled into him, but that's pretty common on how it happens to a lineman. This is a really common injury for all of the linemen because somebody just pops into the side of their leg who another lineman knocked off balance, or, you know, you're in a pile, somebody's kind of going low to try to get past you to like stumble up a running back who's going laterally. Pretty common injury for them. So this first picture we don't have to keep up very long, but the idea was you can see that outside force basically stretches the inside of the knee too much and that tears. Now the spot that they've shown tearing is, I don't think, the most common spot for the full tear, but that's the center of the ligament. Again, when that is the case, they have to put some kind of additional graft, whether they take a piece of tendon from somewhere else, like your hamstring, or like another piece of material to strap your leg as a reinforcement. So let's go on to the next picture, the MCL reconstruction with the strap.
And if anybody's got any questions at all, just feel free to ask Chad anything. He'll take care of you and let you know what's going on.
Yeah, if anything's unclear, again, I usually talk a little technically, but hopefully have like using words everybody can understand. The problem, like last week, Mike had a lot of questions, which was good because I think most typical people would, but we went through so much, he might not naturally have as many questions as other people out there. So if you have a question, yeah, just chime in to the chat and let us know. And again, this will be uploaded afterwards onto YouTube and other platforms. So you can always just DM Bearded Browns or message us and on the comments, and we'll get into it. I won't even mind popping on with somebody or doing a short video, like a reel later, to answer someone's question. So Next picture, we've only got, I think, 2 more, but I like this one with the MCL repair with the strap. I don't know for sure if this was the procedure used with any of these 3 players. This is the big injury that all 3 of them share. So, um, so this is a big one. Normal protocol for this, though, is typically like 3 to 6 month recovery before you can. And again, that doesn't mean after the month, whether it's like 3 to 6 months or you hear 9 to 12 months. That doesn't mean after you hit that time, you're actually just good to go. It means that's when you're most likely going to have passed all the thresholds you need to be cleared to return to sport, which means you start with practice and higher level weight training. And then when your body is ready, like everybody else will be doing this summer and into training camp, you can actually compete. So keep that in mind too. Like people think, I get a lot of times where they're like, I thought you were done with an ACL at 9 months. Well, not true. It might be 9, it might be 11, it might be 12. And when you are cleared, that just means you're cleared to get out there. It doesn't mean you've regained your full confidence, your technique, your strength, your endurance, and you're safe to play yet. You still have to kind of prove that. It's just when you're cleared where the structural stuff is healed enough that it would take a major injury that could hurt a healed ligament or a never been injured ligament for you to hurt yours. That's when they really let you go. When they're like, well, this is strong enough that it's 80, 90 plus percent or 100% of a normal ligament. So you could still hurt it because you hurt the original one, but it would take the kind of event that would hurt a 100% ligament. So there's no real extra risk of having you out there. That's more of what that means. Okay, so we got our last picture up, right, of the MCL with the strap. And all I wanted to let people know about this is all 3 of these players had some kind of procedure like this to repair that MCL, that medial collateral ligament, the inside ligament of their knee. And there's basically 2 things you can do. If you look at this picture, it essentially has, you can see screws up into the natural MCL, pushing the MCL into the bone where the rest of the MCL would have been. I think the upper end has a line, right? Yeah, where that might have been torn apart. So you can use anchor screws just to put the MCL back into the bone, and then those will help structurally hold that ligament while it heals, and it will just be a bonus protection after you heal. In some cases, though, that's not enough because either the severity of the tear or the location of the tear. So what they'll do is they'll try to suture and fix the MCL the best they can to the bone, and then they'll take something like you see in this picture, a small band from your hamstring that they actually cut off your own body at a thicker portion of your hamstring, or they can use like a synthetic type of material, some kind of external like medical device material, and they can use that as a strap. They have that out there now as a reinforcement that I think would probably be pretty common for an athlete, because if you take a piece of their hamstring, of course, that means that they may be more limited. Of course, your body will accept it well with a very low chance of like a surgical complication or like your body rejecting the graft because it's your own. But in this kind of case, I think it's going to become more common to use an external strap to help reinforce that ligament where needed.
They don't use a piece of your butt cheek?
No, it's probably not butt cheek, although they do use, I mean, your glute has a massive tendon. That booty muscle has some thick tendon on it. That's an easy spot to locate there. But
that's why I asked. I knew it was kind of common.
Yeah, you got it. It sounds funny, but hey, you got that glute muscle with a nice big chunk of tendon holding that booty onto the bone. But I don't know. Back in practice, I feel like anytime I heard things like this, I would hear hamstring grafting. It's very common. But there's also, you have a huge Achilles tendon, you have a huge patellar tendon, you've got a glute tendon. They could use like one of your glutes, though, whether it's not your big gluteus maximus, whether it's not that big butt muscle, they could use the tendon from one of your smaller kind of lateral butt muscles too. So yeah, They're just basically using your own tissue to create a little graft. Now, this you might hear anywhere from like 3 months to 6 months protocol to recover. Again, it has much less to do with the timetable. The time just means you need probably the lower end of that protocol for the actual tissue itself to seal together. So if you hear like 9 to 12, it means probably at about 9, it's strong enough in most people, the graft, to like return to higher level activity if you've passed all the other tests along the way. Um, so this is more of a 3 to 6 month type of a protocol. You will get into it and where they may be at in this recovery, but it does follow a similar thing. You're going to be able to more quickly lift weights with this because there isn't that lateral force. You're going to be able to get your strength up higher. It's going to be lateral movements, unpredictable movements, and taking contact that is going to slow you down in this one. And so once you have good stability in that knee and all your muscles kind of can compensate to help, protect you from kind of the knee shifting while you're moving around in your typical like lineman moves or protecting against a pass rusher, you probably won't be out in practice. And then there's no reason to rush this. Just like we talked about with Jack, we've got this month before training camp. They probably didn't do much, if anything, before this, because why do a week of activity there where you can wait the extra 4 to 6 weeks and really get them back when you
move away from mini
more
camp.
healing time. Yeah. I mean, this practice in all these guys are veterans at least of a year, and they've all proven that they can play the game enough where it's like we don't need one extra week of fake non-contact practice anyway. They're just running drills. So if they could do it easily and safely, of course they'll get them going. It might be part of their rehab process anyway. But again, if they're not quite there, you would just hold them out for minicamp and OTAs and give them that extra full month or two. Last thing on the list is a MCL.
Meniscus repair?
A meniscus repair. And on this meniscus repair, this goes with Dawand Jones. So he was the one that had the MCL tear as well, but also the meniscus. So this isn't going to change his timetable of his protocol. The protocol for meniscus repair is going to be about the same length as that MCL repair. So if not a little bit shorter, depending on the severity of each one. One could be a little bit longer than the other, but they're both going to be something you're looking at about 3 to 6 months of a rehab protocol to hit all these thresholds to be released to full activity. So again, the picture is basically showing there's where a tear could be. There's a bunch of different kinds. The tear could be, vertical instead of horizontal. It could be at any part of that meniscus, which is the cushion underneath the knee, all the way around, kind of a 2 C-shaped cushions, and they're little protective pillows around the knee that help absorb shock.
Do those always tear on the outside, or could they tear inside of the bone?
They could tear on the inside. Yeah. And again, even on the outside here, they are still like kind of sealed to the bone, but chances are they tear along the rim. The most common tears is kind of a bucket handle tear, which means it tears in a circle in the direction that the fibers of that C are going. So in the picture you have, it's a very minor tear. It could be longer. It could be more towards the middle, which is why they call it a bucket handle. We talked about it again a little bit more in Nick Chubb's because he did have a meniscus tear. And again, what they do in that picture, you can see they kind of put a little device in there arthroscopically, and they put stitches along the thing to hold it together so it can kind of reseal together. And then the stitching along with the scarring will heal that meniscus. The big thing is you just have to be very careful with it while it's healing, which what that can do is slow down your exercise ability during the recovery. It doesn't really slow your protocol, but it means you may not be able to do quite as much weightlifting. You can't do earlier running. It just limits when you can do high activity and exercise.
That's essentially the bone sitting on top of that. So you would want stitches getting pulled out by your bone, possibly rubbing it across.
Yeah, you don't want to take like a wrong step or a run and land, and the bone kind of comes down on that meniscus, and maybe it rotates a little, you don't want to rip any of those stitches out. You want to let them fully heal before you do any other activity. So again, just a little bit of a complicating factor to the MCL recovery. So those two, again, depending on their severity, one could take a little longer than the other. But I would guess, given the information we know, the MCL seems like it was the major injury for both of them, and that's what I would predict that their timetable is based on.
So in layman's terms, looking at the picture, you could just imagine a toilet bowl, and then
yeah, that is a very similar shape. Yeah, and it's open. It's actually in the middle of the knee. If you remember from the ACL picture, it's these two C-shaped thing. So it would be a little bit more like that toilet bowl that doesn't have the front, right?
Right.
So it's kind of like more like a Cincinnati Reds or like Chicago-shaped C, like an elongated C.
We can go with those two cities. I'm cool with that.
Like that's the shape of a toilet seat, right? So think toilet, just think Cincinnati, right? And this will help you remember the meniscus. No, but yeah, so his tear, got repaired. A lot of times you'll hear of a meniscectomy too. That means there was probably a small chunk torn, and it was easy for them to just cut that out. The problem is that doesn't grow back. So anybody who's recovering, who they have the chance to, they're going to repair it so that you can keep that whole meniscus in there. And if it's a severe repair, they're not going to cut out a huge chunk. It's a faster recovery, just a couple weeks, but it does hinder you in the long term. And somebody that age and at that level of athlete, you're going to take the long rehab, the longer surgery, and the better long-term outcome for somebody like that. So to close things out, because we're kind of coming up to the end here, right? We are going to just cover where the guys are from what we know on the rehab. So Jack Conklin, again, longest road to recovery, but I guess you can say now that things worked out, fortunate for him, like Nick Chubb, that the injury happened very early, so they have all this time to come back. It looked like his announcement said in June that he was kind of cleared for recovery, at least like without so much saying it, like, oh, it's such a hard road to recovery. My wife was my strength, all that very athletic, gratefulness type of a tweet. It lets you know probably he got cleared for like a return to sport, or it would have been an odd time, like a month before he's cleared, to post something like that. Something like, I'm so grateful to have made it through this recovery process. It was very difficult. I don't have the tweet, but essentially, I think everybody took that as okay, he's going to be cleared when camp starts. Whether you never take it for granted, whether he tweaks it a little bit somewhere and it gets inflamed and it sets him back a little bit, he's got to be ready to start camp, make it through camp healthy, and be ready to go to start the season before we can really just call him healthy.
Me and Angel are actually going to the camp August 4th. So
I know, I'm excited. I was going to ask you guys if either of you got a chance to go. That's awesome. Yeah, you'll have to keep an eye out and tell me what you see the different guys doing between Nick and the tackles. And then it sounds like we won't have to. We're going to cover one more episode, including Deshaun Watson and his shoulder, so people understand that complication, because I still do get a lot of questions about long-term recovery, what we should expect from him this year. So we've got one more episode to go before it really gets all done with the Road to Recovery series, but keep an eye on the guys so far. It sounds like Deshaun by then will be practicing full go, so I don't think you'll see much. For him, contact isn't really a worry. He's going to be wearing a red jersey, right? So he can just go out there and throw. It's more on his own joint.
Right.
Less risk. He's going to get hit or something. So we can expect probably Conklin to be ready for practice to start the year. In an interview with Jones, that's where we got the most out of him. I haven't heard from Jedrick. I tried to do some digging, but he basically said that he and Jones and Wills have been working together in their rehab through some of the offseason and then coming back for OTAs, which is good to hear. He did slip to say that Dawand, that he was a little bit ahead of Jedrick Wills in his recovery. And again, that could be because Jed had the more significant injury, or because even though the injury happened a month earlier, Jed was trying to rehab it and come back without having a surgery so he could play the end of the season. And because of that, he actually stayed out several weeks, 5 weeks or something, still going to therapy, physical therapy, to try to recover it, and athletic training. And so he may have actually had his surgery a little bit after. So he's not much. They're both in the same age bracket, I think. Jones is what, like 22 to 23 years old. Jed's probably about like around 25, give or take a year. So both younger guys. So only about two or 3 years apart. So I don't think age will have much of a difference in their recovery. Again, they both had an MCL. Jones had the meniscus to go with it, and Wills had the PCL strain, which is just a mild level tear. Either the ligament gets stretched or it gets stretched and a couple fibers tear. But usually once the level is a 3 strain where it actually tears apart, they'll just start calling it a tear. So I think he didn't have to have probably surgery on that. They probably just are letting that recover. So again, at practice, what we know is in OTAs, Jones did do some individual drilling. So he's at that level where he is allowed to do some football type activity drilling. And Wills was still there, but working with the trainers on the sideline during lineman drills. So again, it does sound like maybe just a step behind. Now they've both got a month to recover. So we'll see how that comes together when they get to Greenbrier and training camp. But again, I would expect both of them to be able to practice through training camp, given their timetables of about 6 months before you can get to full football activity. And that would have put December surgeries, January, February, March, April, May, June. I think Jones did say he was told by the end of June he would be good to go, but he did keep like it open to say, that's the timetable I was given where I'm at, but
Right.
it's to be seen. So he's keeping realistic about it, that he has to work through it still and get that knee to the next level. And so that was the most significant stuff that I could find from training camp of where they all are. And then other than that, we'll see. We've got 3 guys who are both probably talented enough and versatile enough, and all of them have some experience. I think Dawand, did he play left tackle at Ohio State? I couldn't remember. We might have to check on that.
I think he played just right tackle.
Did he stay at right tackle? Okay, so he's been a right tackle through and through. We'll see. That makes it a little more challenging for him to switch sides, although his skill set, I think, is the type of skill set that a left tackle would do well with. I'm pretty sure Conklin was a left tackle in college, and then he swung over and played right tackle since. And Wills was a right tackle in college, which is more of the left tackle position because of Tua being a lefty. And then he swung over to left tackle for us. So we've got some tackle versatility with multiple guys who could probably, in a pinch, play the other side better than whoever their backup is. So, it's going to be about, who is ready to perform in some cases for this tackle room more than like just, who can handle whichever job. Realistically, we'll see some different stuff when
Wow. Hold on.
when
Dawand Jones actually started all 13 games in 21 as a right guard, and then 13 games at right tackle in 22.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. Okay.
I did not either. So thank you, Google.
I did not know he played guard. He'd be a big guard. Holy cow. Yeah, what a surprise. So yeah, I guess I learned something a little new today. But anyway, so that is our tackle road to recovery. It doesn't look like any questions came through. Hopefully some come into our chat later because it'll be good to talk about. But that is that covers 3 players' injuries in this session. In the time we covered 1 with Nick Chubb. But again, I'd recommend anybody go back and watch that Nick Chubb one. We get real in depth with the knee, and it will give you a level of kind of understanding of what are very common football injuries between the meniscus, the LCLs, the MCL, the ACL, obviously. Everybody kind of knows that one. And all of those knee injuries, essentially, you'll have some mastery on as other guys get hurt. And it just gives you a more realistic expectation of when guys can be back, what to expect from them. the good thing is compared to like what we talked about, an Achilles tear or like a pec tear, a muscle tendon tear. The good news is this is structural and you can train your muscles around it, which means unlike some of these other injuries, though there is going to be some room for error, you don't have to work yourself back through the season as much as you would with like a patellar tendon tear or a Achilles tear. When they do get back on the field, it's fair that though there might be a little bit of a setback, they're not going to have quite the recovery time needed of actual playing to get their performance up. They should be able to get back to kind of peak performance earlier on in this season. You don't have to wait until like the end of the year or next year before they're good again.
I know we're all hoping for that, just as well as everybody was hoping for us to do a show under an hour, and we still surpassed that today. Yeah.
Did we go over an hour? Dang it. Okay.
Tuesday.
I thought we were like, I'm like watching this. I'm like, I think we're right about to hit 1 hour. Last fun fact to end the show. I didn't know this, and so I just found it out doing the research for this this injury. So our new offensive line coach, we're all pretty familiar with Callahan. People know my thoughts on him. I had my questions about him working with young players, but his reputation around the league of being one of, if not the best line coaches around, kind of outshines any concern I had about him working with the young rookies. But I did not realize that our new offensive line coach, Andy Dickerson, actually worked under Callahan with the Jets from 2008 to 2011, early on with his career, getting himself going as a line coach. And then since then, he's been in a couple other locations. I think most recently Seattle, coaching the offensive line. So I did think that was interesting because in one interview, I think it was Dawand who might have said, it's nice to have Andy Dickerson because we've all been learning techniques under Callahan, and talking with him, he's on board with most of those techniques because he's familiar with them, also working under Callahan in the past. So I thought that was kind of cool to know, when you switch over a line coach or any position coach, really, the concern is, these guys are going to have to learn like their preferred technique. But it's kind of nice to know that he shares a lot of the technique philosophy with Callahan. And they said he will be adjusting little things for us, but he's on board with the kind of technique we were already taught to go along with this offense. So I thought that was pretty cool.
I think that's cool. I think Dickerson has some big shoes to fill. And with him being like a little stepbrother, that should be a shoe in. I wonder if he's nervous because of all the injuries and
on the positive side, I'm sure he would love to get into it. We talked about the idea of somebody like Dawand Jones switching over and playing left tackle if Jedrick Wills like underperforms or just isn't healthy. The negative to that is he could have been practicing that technique and working through that all off season. Now he spent that time rehabbing. And so, although you can still work at technique and footwork, something we hadn't really ever talked about in the podcast is if he's just now getting cleared for football activity in June, late June into July, that really cuts his timeline to work him on the left tackle position. I would never count that out as a realistic thought passage for him in the future, because I think he has that kind of skill set. But I think, like I said, any of these guys are probably skilled and talented enough to play on the right or left side. It's just a matter of where do you put them to get the best out of them and the other player on the opposite side of them on the line. So we'll see. It's going to be a tough year for any kind of transitions. I think our best hope is that all of them just get back ready to play and we can get the two healthiest and best players in there and have a third who is a very high level. I think most of the league would say whoever is the odd man out is going to be the best backup swing tackle in the league, right? So we'll be ready, and we'll monitor how that looks when they get to Greenbrier and see if my timetables are right. But I expect these guys will all be ready to go somewhere between August and the end of September at the latest, if all things go right.
Yeah. And that is the road to recovery for our whole damn offensive line, essentially.
Yep. Yep.
And we'll be live again Tuesday. We have a special guest joining us on that show. That show is kind of going to be a free for all. We're just going to have fun that show. And
yeah, we're just going to do Random Topic Tuesday. So great chance for anyone who wants to talk about anything particular. We'll probably just start grabbing topics and we'll talk about them for 5 to 10 minutes with our guest, and then we'll go on our own after.
Yeah. But yeah, today's show is also sponsored by CB Excavating. You guys can call Chris at 216-870-4026 for all your excavation needs. I'll take care of you. He's a good guy.
I kind of like that kind of sponsor because if I'm being honest, I've got house stuff going on constantly, and me and my friends are always talking about their house and yard stuff, and I feel like what an unique thing to have done where you wouldn't even know a starting position. Like, who would I possibly call to get this? Like, I feel like that's not something you want to just start digging through Google to find. So, follow our lead and go with somebody that the Bearded Browns trust, right?
Not only that, he'll come out to you on Sunday if needed during the Browns game. Sewer issues? Call Chris.
I wouldn't.
CB Excavating. You're in a whole different time zone. He would not come to you, that's for sure.
I just meant I'm not doing it on Sunday, but I do think it's, good on him for being willing to take the day.
Well, I can almost say good afternoon to you, Chad, but it's still early there. But
we're at 11 something.
Enjoy some more coffee. Enjoy your day, and we will see everybody Tuesday. Thank you for joining us today.